if there is one thing that I have been gradually understanding more and more over the last couple years of my life, is that so much of human experience, human history, human thought, so much of the essence of what it means to be a human being revolves around patterns. Patterns and our ability to interact with patterns, our ability to notice patterns, our ability to make sense out of the chaos of the universe all around us. That is so much of what it means to be human. And this is something that humans have been struggling to do throughout their entire existence. The world is very unpredictable. There could be an earthquake tomorrow. There could be a meteorite that hits the earth. We don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen with your family members. You don't know what's going to happen with your job. You don't know what's going to happen in this election that's coming up. You don't know what's going to happen in your neighborhood, in your community. The building next to you could catch on fire. There's a lot of things that you don't know. And this is something that humans have always dealt with. We don't know. We don't know. And so, in our not knowing and in our vulnerability, we have struggled to grasp truth and grasp understanding of the world around us and find security in the world around us. And we have been able to do that by learning the nature of reality and by noticing patterns. And I want everyone here to know that I do not know what tomorrow will bring. Today is Saturday. And I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I do know that every Saturday in my entire life has been followed by a Sunday. And every Sunday in my entire life has been followed by a Monday. And every Monday in my entire life has been followed by a Tuesday. And the Sunday that comes tomorrow will be unlike any other Sunday that has ever existed. And the Monday that comes after that will be unlike any other Monday that has ever existed. And that the universe around us is constantly changing, constantly adjusting. But every summer is followed by a fall or an autumn. And every autumn or fall is followed by a winter. And every winter is followed by a spring. Every spring is followed by a summer. Every summer is followed by autumn. Every autumn is followed by a winter. And then you have spring all over again. And it is this pattern that brings us a sense of security. The tide goes in, the tide goes out. And this is the nature of human existence. And one way that we human beings have tried to make sense of the world around us and tried to communicate and pay attention to patterns is by telling stories, myths, legend, allegory, fable, parable, all of these things have brought us a sense of security. And if you look at the myths, the legends, the films, the novels, the stories that are everywhere, you can learn a lot about a people or a civilization and their culture. Stories tell you a lot. And I have made it my mission to find the good in the American people. I can sit here and complain about the bad of the American people, the bad of the American society, the bad of American imperialism all day long, but I'm accomplishing very little if I just focus on the negative. I have made it my mission to find the good in the American people. And when I find the good in the American people, when I look for the good in the American people, one place that I find it is in one of the most important stories in American culture. Superman. 1939, there was a comic book that was published. There were many comic books that were published back then. Two comic book writers living in Cleveland, they decided to write a comic book to see if they could make some money. And they came up with this story of Superman. And for whatever reason, it became a story that did not die. This story caught on. It touched something in the American soul. A story of a boy who comes from another planet, has normal, wholesome Midwestern farming parents from Kansas, but deep down has a secret that he has superpowers, that he is faster than a locomotive, faster than a speeding bullet. He's got superpowers. And Superman lives a humble life as mild-mannered reporter Clark Kent. But when danger arrives, Superman runs into the nearest phone booth and he changes into this crazy costume in which his underwear is on the outside of his pants, in which he's got a cape, and which, it seems like it's rather skin tight. You can see his muscles. He takes off his glasses so that no one can tell who he is, because, glasses are, just the perfect disguise. And he rushes in to save the day. Superman. And it started out as this comic book in 1939. I think this is number 6. Started out in 1939. And then, after that, it was a radio program, it was a television show, it was a movie, and then it was another movie, and then it was another movie, and then it was another movie, and another movie, and another movie, and another movie. And it was another TV show, and another cartoon, and another live-action TV show. And this is very, very much a part of who we are as Americans. Superman is a piece of the American soul. And as must be pointed out, there is a lot of really good stuff about Superman. First of all, Superman is against racism, which back in 1939 was a pretty big deal. Back in 1939, black people couldn't vote. Black people couldn't drink out of the same drinking fountains as white people. But Superman, in every comic and every story, was going around saying that racism and racial bigotry was opposed to truth, justice, and the American way. Superman even fought the Ku Klux Klan in the radio program during World War II. Superman is a friend of the working class. One of his first adventures is rescuing a group of miners whose crooked boss is conspiring to destroy their union and kill them in a mining accident. He rescues the workers from their crooked boss. In addition to that, who is the villain in the Superman comics? Well, the villain is a wealthy capitalist, a bald guy who uses his control over technology to scheme against the whole country. A maniacally evil, bald techno wizard who uses his control over new technological advancement to manipulate and control the people and rule over them. He's Lex Luthor. He's Jeff Bezos, a technocratic Silicon Valley maniacal fascist, an advocate of the rule of a technological elite over the rest of humanity. But Superman fights against Lex Luthor in the name of truth, justice, and the American way. He stands up to Lex Luthor. He stands up for democracy and the rule of the people against the technocratic schemes of the elite. Superman is an anti-fascist, if there ever was one. And, let me add, what is the way one would say the phrase man of steel in Russian? Stalin. Superman is the man of steel. He is Uncle Joe. He's Country Joe from the countryside, fighting for the working class, fighting against racism, fighting against the technocratic elite fascists, fighting for common people, for democracy, for truth, justice, and the American way. I love Superman. I love Superman. Superman is an American theme, an American value that we can attach to, and it comes from the best moment in our history. From the time when the Communist Party of the United States had a mass following, it had people all across this country who were loyal to it, who organized unemployment councils, who built the CIO, who backed up Roosevelt against the threat of a fascist coup, who aligned with the Soviet Union and with the people of China against fascism in the Second World War. Superman represents a very, very good side of the American spirit, a side that I am happy to embrace. However, let's continue beyond Superman. There is a much older legend. A much older legend. It goes back much further in the English-speaking world. It goes back many, many centuries. I think in the 1950s, they had a television program. Robin Hood, riding through the land. Robin Hood, with his band of men. He robs from the rich and gives to the poor. Robin Hood, Robin Hood, Robin Hood. Who was Robin Hood? You could say Robin Hood was the original superhero. Robin Hood was a legend that developed in medieval England. And it was part of the Spring Festival. In medieval England, under feudalism, when it got warm again, to celebrate the warm weather, all the little towns and villages had something called the Spring Festival. And at the Spring Festival, they would have an archery contest. And at the Spring Festival, they would have, little competitions to see who could run the fastest. They would have foot races and such. But part of the Spring Festival in medieval England was they would put on a play about Robin Hood. And what's weird is that Robin Hood was kind of an attack on feudal society. Robin Hood is a criminal. He's a bandit who goes around robbing people. There were a lot of bandits in medieval times in medieval England. And they were not nice people. Generally, people became bandits if they were peasants and they did something wrong. And so the landlord kicked them off the land. So they couldn't be peasants anymore and they'd have to hide in the woods and rob people. And they were starving and desperate and they were nasty, nasty people. But Robin Hood was a nice bandit. He was a bandit who went around robbing the rich to feed the poor. He was a bandit that everybody liked. In addition to that, who was one of Robin Hood's accomplices? Friar Tuck. And Friar Tuck was a priest who was lazy, a fat, lazy guy. And he was a mockery of the clergy because the clergy, in a lot of cases, they were seen as kind of living off the tithes of the people, living off the order. They didn't have to do that much. They only had to do the mass on Sunday. And so Friar Tuck, this kind of fat priest who's always holding a piece of meat in his hand and always eating, which, back then to have a piece of meat was, a luxury. He was kind of seen as this fat and lazy caricature of the clergy. And what does Robin Hood go around doing? He goes around robbing the landowners, the aristocrats, the nobles. You're not supposed to rob them, but he goes around robbing them and redistributing their wealth to the poor people. And it's a nice, fun story. And at the time that there were landlords oppressing peasants, and at the time that there were bandits that robbed people and did horrendous things, at the time the clergy and the church was said to have absolute power and criticizing them meant being burned at the stake, every year, as part of the Spring Festival, they would put on this play that seemed to spit in the face of everything that feudal society was saying. In feudalism, the landowners ruled and had absolute power, but they watched a play where the hero was a bandit, someone who'd been kicked off the land, who would go and rob the landowner and redistribute his money. They watched a play that made fun of the clergy. They watched a play where a bandit, a bad guy, a nasty criminal who generally got the death penalty if they could ever catch them, was the hero. They watched this play that seemed to mock and spit in the face of feudalism as part of the Spring Festival. And because Robin Hood was said to be a great archer, they would then have an archery contest. They would have a foot race, and it was just part of the revelry as they got ready for the summer. Peasants had to work pretty hard in the summertime growing their crops, and then in the fall doing the harvest. But springtime, as they were gearing up for yet another year coming out of the winter and the snow's melting and all of that, they get together and they do a play about Robin Hood. And we don't even know where the legend of Robin Hood started, but we know it took on many different leaps and evolutions. And the version of it that we now know with King John and the Crusades and all of that, that didn't come into being for hundreds of years. The story had been around for hundreds of years before that, right? It was just something that was deep in the culture, and it reflected deeply the feelings and values of the people of medieval England. If you want to know how peasants felt, if you want to know how people felt about the feudal order, go and look at the old Robin Hood pageants, not the novels and all of that, but the old Robin Hood pageants. It was they were lighthearted comedies making fun of the feudal order, making fun of feudal society, and telling this legend. And it's fascinating. It really has a lot to say. But Robin Hood was one of the first. He started a trend, even up till today. There's a trend they call social bandits. Social bandits. And the idea is that there's some criminal, some bank robber, some thief, some, highwayman or whatever, who is noble, and his crime is motivated by selfless desire to help the poor. This is a legend that happens all over the world. All over the world, they have stories of the outlaw, the bandit who robs from the rich to feed the poor. All over the world, they have this story. And the sad thing is, it's often not true. Often, the bandit that everyone's glorifying isn't really helping anybody, but they make up a story about him helping people, right? There's a famous criminal from the 1930s they called Pretty Boy Floyd, right? I think Woody Guthrie has a story. If you gather around me, children, a story I will tell of Pretty Boy Floyd, the outlaw. Oklahoma knew him well. Well, Pretty Boy Floyd, there's no evidence of him ever helping any poor people. He was just a self-motivated bank robber, right? But at the time, all kinds of legends and tall tales erupted and spread throughout Oklahoma during the Great Depression because people were mad at the banks, because people were hungry, people were angry, and they wanted a good guy. They wanted somebody they could cheer for. And on the radio and in the newspapers, the government, the establishment was telling everyone about this very evil bank robber named Pretty Boy Floyd. He had kind of a romantic name, Pretty Boy Floyd. And so because of that, people invented this story of how Pretty Boy Floyd was actually Robin Hood, and he was helping, rob from the rich to feed the poor, and he was giving $100 bills to poor unwed mothers, and none of it ever happened. They just made it up. Pretty Boy Floyd was a bank robber. He was a criminal bank robber. But they wanted to believe in something. They wanted there to be someone who was standing up for right. They wanted to be able to cheer for something. And the government that they were being told to cheer for was actually corrupt and allowing people to starve on the streets. And the rich and powerful that they were told to admire were actually liars and scumbags. And so they wanted to cheer for someone. And so this legend of Pretty Boy Floyd as the Robin Hood, as the man who goes out and robs from the rich to feed the poor, developed because they wanted there to be truth. They wanted there to be right. They wanted the villains to be defeated. They wanted there to be a force of opposition for which they could cheer. Right? And my parents, I remember hearing from my parents. My parents are not left-wing political activists by any means. But I remember they told me that when they were in the 1970s, when they were, young people, when the heiress, what's her name? Patty Hearst, the daughter of William Randolph Hearst, or the granddaughter maybe, when she was kidnapped by this strange Maoist communist group called the Symbionese Liberation Army, all the young people with long hair who listened to rock and roll music would say, right on. And they loved the kidnapping of Patty Hearst, right? This strange, bizarre group, the Symbionese Liberation Army, kidnapped a wealthy heiress named Patty Hearst. And all over Ohio and Pennsylvania and Texas, there would be Patty Hearst sightings. And it was a big thing. And all the young people that were against the Vietnam War and had long hair and all of that, they all thought that the Symbionese Liberation Army was right on for kidnapping Patty Hearst. My parents remember this, and they were not particularly left wing. They're not from the political left. They're not activists of any type. But I remember them telling me, "Oh yeah, in the 70s, we all thought it was so cool that the Symbionese Liberation Army had kidnapped Patty Hearst, and we all thought it was the coolest thing." It's kind of a similar phenomenon. It's a very similar phenomenon. That's a little bit different because that wasn't a class-based alienation. That was more of a generation gap. It was young people didn't want to fight in the Vietnam War, etc. But it's a similar phenomenon. They wanted there to be a good guy in the story. They wanted there to be a protagonist, not just a lot of evil villains in the story. They wanted to cheer for someone. So just like Pretty Boy Floyd, suddenly people made the Symbionese Liberation Army into heroes, right? And that this happens. And I now have to tell you, about a man, a legend, that existed in the year of 1910. In the year of 1910, on the Korean Peninsula, there was an outlaw who fought against the Japanese. He fought against the Japanese occupiers, and he was a bandit. He robbed from the rich. And according to the legend, he fed the poor, and he fought the Japanese occupiers. And he was the Robin Hood of Korea. Korea was occupied and colonized by Japan. And in 1910, there was a bandit. There was a pretty boy Floyd. There was a social bandit on the Korean Peninsula. The Robin Hood of the Korean Peninsula, the pretty boy Floyd of the Korean Peninsula. And his nickname was Kim Becomes the Sun, right? S-U-N, like the rising sun. He said Kim Becomes the Sun was his name, and he was known as Kim Il-sung. And he died. He was killed by the Japanese occupiers. But a couple of years later, some of the communists that were fighting against Japan, they started calling their leader Kim Il-sung, and then he died. And then another leader emerged, and he became known as Kim Il-sung, and he took on the name of a social bandit. The man who created the Democratic People's Republic of Korea must have been a brilliant, brilliant strategist, a brilliant marketer, because he literally named himself Robin Hood. Right? He thought, hey, I'm going to try to lead my people to fight Japan. I want to be popular with the Korean people who were occupied by Japan. I want to build a resistance movement. So he named himself Robin Hood. He named himself Kim Il-sung. That was not the name he was born with, but he said, you know what? I want to send a message to everybody. And so he led a division of Korean resistance fighters, and they called themselves the Kim Il-sung Battalion, and their military leader was a guy, and they all started agreeing they were going to call him Kim Il-sung. And it was brilliant marketing, because every time anybody ever had to talk about him, they had to call him Robin Hood. And people were predisposed through years of legends and songs to love Robin Hood, to love Kim Il-sung. And so the fact that this resistance fighter, this communist, anti-Japanese, anti-colonial fighter named himself after a Robin Hood figure was very, very strategic. It was very brilliant on his part. And he wasn't the first one to do it. Apparently there was another communist guy before him who did it. And it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. All right. And of course, he then became the leader of the northern half of the Korean Peninsula. The leader of North Korea, I believe that the name he was born with, let me Google, what was his name at birth? Kim Il-sung birth name. His birth name was Kim Song-ju. But he just started calling himself Pretty Boy Floyd. Robin Hood. Kim Il-sung. So that was the first thing I wanted to share with you all. But tonight, the focus of my talk is on patterns. Patterns. And I talked about telling stories and how that is a way that we make sense of the world around us. We find truth. We connect with the world. But now I'm going to talk to another aspect of patterns, which is patterns as they relate to mental health. I am a big fan of Sigmund Freud. There are probably people who've studied formal clinical psychology who would disagree with me about that. But I think that despite the fact that it's not science, it's not falsifiable, I don't call it scientific, I do think that psychoanalysis as a tradition has a lot to offer. I do. I'm guilty of thinking that, right? Perhaps that is considered to be a sin against the liberal order. Perhaps that is considered to be an atrocity against science. But I believe that psychoanalysis and the Freudian tradition, not necessarily Freud himself, though he's the guy who started it, very flawed individual. I think Freud was probably a sociopath. I don't think he was a good person. Regardless, I do believe that the psychoanalytic tradition really tells us a lot about the human mind and the way it works. And I can tell you why in another conversation. But one of the key principles of the psychoanalytic tradition is that it argues that mental illness and mental health are directly related to how human beings observe patterns. That there are two forms of mental illness. There is first neurosis, and then there is psychosis. Neurosis is something that everyone has to some degree or other. Sigmund Freud claimed that you could reach a point in which you are not neurotic, but that has been pretty thoroughly debunked. There is no one who is not a little bit neurotic to some degree. Neurosis means that there's a pattern in your life that you are not noticing, and it is causing you distress. Right? It means, people who get into bad relationships over and over and over again. They date a guy, women who date a guy who's a loser, and then they break up with him, and they think, oh, I'll never make that mistake again. And they date another guy who turns out to be a loser, and then they think, oh, I'll never make that mistake again. Well, there's something neurotic going on. They are not noticing patterns, right? Somebody gets a job and doesn't work out. And so then they go and they get another job. It doesn't work out. They get another job and it doesn't work out. Well, there's some neurosis going on. It is when there are patterns in your life that you are not picking up on. And because you are not picking up on these patterns, it's causing you to be anxious and have a lot of anxiety. It's causing you to be depressed. It's causing you to, to be hopeless. It's hurting your relationship with your spouse or with your children or with your mother or your father. Neurosis. It's just part of the human condition. We are all neurotic to some degree or other. I can guarantee you in your life right now, there are some patterns in your life that you have not become aware of and that are causing you distress, right? And classical Freudian psychoanalysis, the idea is that by sitting on the couch and having the psychoanalyst talk to you, you'll become more and more aware of those patterns. You'll delve into your subconscious mind. You'll become aware of those patterns and you'll become less and less neurotic. That's the idea. That's neurosis. And then the more extreme form of mental illness, according to the Freudian psychoanalytic tradition, is what they call psychosis. And psychosis is the opposite of neurosis. A neurotic person has patterns in their life that they are not aware of. A psychotic person invents patterns that are not there and checks out of reality. And psychosis is a response to being so overwhelmed, so afraid, so confused, so distressed. It's a panic distress, a panicked reaction from the brain. When the amount of pain that a person is feeling is so acute, they just can't continue interacting with the world around them and they check out. And that's called psychosis. And I've seen psychosis. And when I saw psychosis for the first time, I had a roommate who became psychotic. There was someone else that I worked with years ago who was also psychotic. Only 2 times in my life have I directly seen psychosis. When I saw it, it made me want to stop using the word crazy. It made me want to stop using the word, somebody is really angry. You say, oh, he's crazy. Oh, he's nuts. No, I almost wanted to stop doing that when I looked psychosis in the face. When I had a roommate who became psychotic. When I had this person I worked with who also became psychotic. they're not depressed, they're not anxious, they're not insecure, they're not interacting with reality, they're not processing information properly, they are in their own world. There is a world going on in their mind, and the words that you say and the world around them doesn't make a difference. They have collapsed into their own strange internal life. They're thinking people are following them when they're not. They're hearing voices that are not there. They're inventing narratives. They are really, I mean, when you want to talk about, when we what they are is it's something very, very different than somebody who, feels depressed or somebody who feels anxious. It's a completely different thing. And that's why I would maintain that the Freudian distinction between neurosis and psychosis is correct, because I mean, everyone I know and everyone watching this is neurotic to some degree or other. We all are. But psychosis is a very different thing. And psychosis is very, very dangerous and very, very extreme. And there are two distinct forms of mental illness, neurosis and psychosis. Now, that brings me to the point about neurosis, because a lot of what we are trying to do as political activists, as anti-imperialists, as revolutionaries, a lot of what we are trying to do is combat the neurosis of the society around us. For example, every single time, this has happened like 6 times in my life. Every time the USA bombs a country and invades a country, it is the same story. There's a brutal dictator who's oppressing his people, and America just doesn't want to have to intervene, but innocent people are going to die, and there's weapons of mass destruction, and they just got to go in to rescue these poor innocent people, and they don't want to intervene. And Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi and Milosevic and Assad, and they're all, they're brutal. They're the Taliban, and they're oppressing people. And so America, we just have to intervene. We have no choice. And Barack Obama and George W. Bush, they're on the TV crying, and Bill Clinton, I don't want to have to bomb Serbia, but we've got no choice. I'm Bill Clinton. The terrorists, Al-Qaeda, they're torturing people. And we got to invade Afghanistan. Then we got to invade Iraq because they got weapons of mass destruction. Look, I'm Barack Obama, and we got to bomb Libya. Gaddafi is just gonna go kill all these innocent people. Look, I don't want to do it, but we just got to go into Libya. It's always a lie. Every single time, it is a goddamn lie. From the Naria testimony, from Iraq to Grenada to Panama, every single time they invade a country, number one, they tell us a pack of lies to justify it. Number one, they always lie through their teeth. Every time it's time to regime change a country, they lie and they lie, and the weapons of mass destruction aren't there, and Gaddafi wasn't really giving out the pills to rape people, and the chemical attack was actually done by somebody else, and it wasn't done by Assad. And they lie every time. They lie to us. And second of all, the country that supposedly we're going to rescue, America's just going in there. It has to rescue the people, the Libyans, the poor Iraqis, the poor Syrians, the poor Afghans, the poor Serbians, the poor Kosovoans. Every single time, those people end off worse than they were before. They become refugees. Their country gets bombed and destroyed. They don't have electricity. Every time. The very people that these wars, these humanitarian interventions are being waged to protect, every single time they end up worse off as a result of the intervention. It's a lie, and the people in the country end up worse off every time. But yet, there continue to be people who fall for this. Not as many as there were before. All right. We're starting to wake up. More and more people are waking up, but there's always a group of people who watch CNN and oh my God, the poor Iraqi, Libyan, Syrian, Kosovoan children. Oh my God, the poor Afghan women. Every time. Every single time there are people that fall for this. And I say, didn't you see this movie last time? Well, this is different this time, Caleb. This is a totally different country. You can't equate Libya and Iraq. Yes, I can. You can't equate Syria and Libya. Yes, I can. You can't equate, Afghanistan and Kosovo. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. And every time they roll out the same script about how they're going to rescue the poor people that are oppressed by the dictator, by the awful regime, and they have some urgent, scenario, and every time it turns out to be a lie. And our job is, we're kind of performing a psychoanalytic operation, right? We're sitting there with the client on the couch saying, geez, last time you got into a relationship with a guy, I think there was an issue. And the last time you did this at work, there was an issue. We're sitting there and we're trying to explain to people now, are you noticing a pattern here? And we're trying to gently, in a way that people can hear us, right? We can't just scream and yell at them, though sometimes we do, right? Sometimes we just have to let it out, but we want to, in the most effective way possible, get people to understand this pattern. All right, that is what we are doing as revolutionaries and activists. To some degree or other, we are countering people's neurosis. But I would argue that it's more than simply helping people have a political memory. That to some degree or other, being a revolutionary activist, being an organizer, being involved in an organization, I would argue is a way of becoming healthier as a person. I know I certainly have. When you're working together with other people, not on the internet, not when you're listening to a guy stream, keep listening though, but when you're in an organization, when you have a goal that you're trying to achieve, when you're trying to build that event to get as many people to the event as possible, when you are organizing to build that event as much as you possibly can, to get as many people to the event, and you're working really hard day and night, and other people are coming in and we're cheering each other on, that creates a level of positive energy. And it gives you the ability to relate to people and deal with people. And it's very, very healing. And it creates a lot of growth in people, right? I always talk about how it was really being made to go out and sell newspapers. That taught me how to interact with other people and taught me how to engage and how to explain politics to people. That through engaging in activism, through being in an organization, through working with other people, through trying to achieve goals alongside of other people, you can very much improve yourself, and you can gain skills that you can take with you into the workplace, into personal relationships that are not political. You can really improve and become less and less neurotic through being an activist. I would say that if you want to improve your mental health, if you want to become psychologically healthier, one thing I would recommend that you do is become an activist. Join a political organization, work with other people to carry out goals, do outreach, hand leaflets to people you don't know, explain ideas that you believe in to people who don't believe those ideas and are reluctant to hear you out. And while you do it, wrangle with yourself. Ask yourself why you're doing it. Why are you attracted to these ideas? Why in the world would you be listening to Caleb Maupin at 9:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday, September 7th? What brought you here? What in your life, what motivation do you have to be listening to me right now? You don't have to be listening to me right now. There's all kinds of YouTube channels you could be watching. There's all kinds of other people, but you are here for a reason. And I don't know what that is. There's 215 of you watching right now. Every single one of you has a unique reason. And it's not important that I know the reason why you're here. It's important that you know the reason that you are here. Why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you watching this? What made you attracted to these ideas? What made what I'm saying interesting to you? Find out. Delve into your motivations, your desires. Get to know who you are as a person and what motivates you and what you want to achieve, what brings you satisfaction, what your greatest fears are, what your greatest desires are, what it is that gets you interested and what it is that makes you bored. Get to know yourself. And that if you get to know yourself better, you can know other people better. You can go inward so that you can go outward, and you can go outward so that you can go inward. That's what I would argue, and that being a revolutionary is a journey of self-improvement. It's about becoming the best person you can be by joining an organization of people who want you to be the best person that you can be. Find a group that is going to empower you. Find an organization that is going to help you develop a skill, that is going to put you to work and utilize your strength. Find it. That's what I would challenge you to do. But that brings me to what it is that I was going to talk to you all about tonight. Because I started out this stream by talking about patterns. First, we talked about myths and legends and stories and Superman and Robin Hood. Then from there, we talked about neurosis and psychosis, and we talked about U.S. regime change wars, and we talked about how being an activist is a way to cure neurosis and all of that. Well, now I'm going to hit you with something even heavier. There's a word in Greek that is used, it is used in the Christian Bible. The Christian Bible was originally written in Greek, and it's a word that is used over and over again in the Christian Bible, and it didn't translate very well. All right, I believe the Gospel of John says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God." What in the world does that mean? Well, this is what it means. This is a Greek word called logos. This is Wikipedia. Logos is a term used in Western philosophy, psychology, and rhetoric, as well as religion, notably Christianity. Among its connotations is that of a rational form of discourse that relies on inductive and deductive reasoning. Logos is the belief that there is order in the universe. And that is the foundation of Western civilization. Western civilization, from ancient Greece to Rome to modern Europe to the modern world that we live in, is founded on the premise that there is order in the universe. That there is order in the universe. And that, in philosophy, there are generally two contending schools, right? I talk about how there are idealists and materialists. The materialist says all that exists is matter, and thoughts and feelings are just a reflection of matter. And the idealist says, no, matter is a reflection of thought, right? It's the thoughts of God that created us. Thinking creates the world. I think, therefore I am. The materialist says, no, I am, therefore I think. Thought is inseparable from matter that thinks. So you have idealists and materialists. Well, in philosophy, you have rationalists and irrationalists. And the foundation of philosophical rationalism is logos. It's the belief that, geometry works. mathematical equations work. You can measure things. There are laws of physics in the universe, numbers and mathematical patterns. There are things in the world that we can measure. There is order in the universe. And in opposition to those who believe that there is order in the universe, you have irrationalists. And the irrationalists, like Friedrich Nietzsche, right? They argue there is not order in the universe. They are the irrationalists. And this whole book, this great book, George Lukács, The Destruction of Reason, this great book was written by a Marxist philosopher arguing against Friedrich Nietzsche. And the philosophical irrationalists who came to rise in the early parts of the 20th century, the late 19th century, among Western capitalists, among the defenders of the decaying imperialist order, there became a rise of individuals who said there is no order in the universe. The universe is defined by chaos. Order is a myth, and that is the basis of what they call postmodernism. It is the basis of a lot of the toxicity that's out there is based on this premise. There is really no order in the universe. And anyone who tries to impose order on the universe is being totalitarian, is trying to brainwash you. The universe is just a big mesh of chaos. We're all just randomly here. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's no up, there's no down. Everything is just completely chaos. And so you can choose your own adventure and try to have fun amid the chaos. That's called philosophical irrationalism. I reject philosophical irrationalism. I think that 2 + 2 = 4. I think that up is the opposite of down. I think that there are measurable things in the universe. But the reason philosophical irrationalism prevails, and this is where we're entering some dangerous territory, but I know you all are brave. And so we're going to enter some dangerous territory. Because there is a lot of chaos in the universe. There's plenty of chaos in the universe. And that chaos is constantly battling against the order. The order is struggling to hold things together, and the chaos is struggling to push against it. Now, this word logos, in the Christian tradition, the word logos is a synonym for God. God is order. And if God is order, what then would be Satan? Satan would be chaos. God is order. Satan is chaos. And if we look at the world around us, it is a constant battle between God and Satan. A constant push and pull between order and chaos. But that in and of itself brings us to the beauty. Because there is order, there is logos in the world, but there's also chaos in the world. But there's actually something amazing that happens. And that brings me to, I'm going to quote a philosophical irrationalist, probably the most well-known philosophical irrationalist. It's one of my favorite quotes. It's not the most common translation of it. He originally wrote this in German. And I originally heard this version of it. Now there's a different translation of it, but the translation that I like is this. One must be filled with chaos to give birth to a dancing star. When I heard this quotation, when I was in college and I read Thus Spake Zarathustra, I immediately knew what Friedrich Nietzsche was talking about. And I immediately knew the beauty of the world that we live in. What is he saying here? One must be filled with chaos to give birth to a dancing star. What was he saying? That's the beauty of the world we live in. There is order, but that order is constantly being challenged by chaos. But when the chaos is subdued by the order that comes is stronger. There is a perfect dialectic between God and Satan. When order is challenged and forced to hold itself together and withstand the chaos, the order is strengthened. And you need the chaos to challenge the order for the order to be stronger. And what we understand about economics is a great example. We understand the problem of capitalism being the anarchy of production, the chaos of the market, the irrationality of production. Under capitalism, the banks and the factories and the industries and the centers of economic power only function in order to make profits for those who own them. And as a result, we have things that we've never had before. We have people becoming homeless because there are too many houses. We have people becoming hungry because there is too much food. The coal miner's riddle. The little boy says to his father, "Why is it so cold?" And the father says, "Because I can't afford any coal to heat the stove." And the little boy says, "Why can't we afford any coal to heat the stove?" The father says, "Because I lost my job at the coal mine." And he says, "Why did you lose your job at the coal mine?" He says, "Because there is too much coal." Poverty created by abundance, poverty amid plenty, makes absolutely no sense. But it is the result of the chaos of the market. Profits in command. Capitalism is the dominance of the market. Feudalism was a very ordered, structured society in which there was no growth. Under feudalism, there was very little technological progress. There was very little economic growth. The peasant went out and grew his crops. He gave his obligation to the landlord. He kept what he could. The guilds, blacksmiths were not allowed to innovate new ways of working with metal. Basket weavers were not allowed to innovate new ways to weave baskets. Everyone just kind of had to keep everything as it is. And if you were born into a noble position, you stayed in that position your whole life. If you were born into a peasant position, you were born into it your whole life. It was a very ordered society, but it was restraining the productive forces. Human beings want growth. They want to expand. They want more than they already have. They are a creative species that invents and creates. And feudalism was restricting, the order of feudalism was restricting human growth. So what happened? It got ripped open with the French Revolution, and they tore down the feudal order, and they cut off the head of the king, and chaos reigned. And the American Revolution and the German Revolution of 1848, and the order of feudal society was ripped open so the productive forces could rise, so we could have steam engines, so we could have computers. It was the ripping open of the feudal order in order to allow the productive forces to run free. Capitalism was a necessary advance over feudalism. The order of feudalism had become outmoded. Human beings were restrained by that irrational order. And so you needed the chaos to come in and rip that order to shreds, to tear down the idols and the false gods, to dethrone the kings and cut their heads off, to declare the equal rights of man, to talk about freedom of religion and freedom of science and freedom of speech. All of feudalism had to be ripped apart so the productive forces could explode, and they did explode. But after they broke free, we now have chaos, and we live in a society of chaos. We live in a society where self-driving cars are a restraint on human progress, where self-driving cars would lead to chaos and hunger in the streets. What sense does that make? Why should we be afraid of self-driving cars? It would be great if we had self-driving cars. Self-driving cars would mean the chore, the labor of driving was no longer necessary. But in our irrational system, a great technological advancement where cars could drive themselves would lead to mass unemployment. That is not rational. The chaos that was unleashed by ripping apart feudalism has gotten so out of control, and human productivity has advanced, and the productive forces have exploded with energy. There's all kinds of chaos in the universe, and we're at the point that they're tearing down borders. They're creating an international system. They're saying there is no truth. Everything is coming apart because the chaos, the liberalism, the individualism, above all else, chaos abounds. Satan is everywhere. Chaos, the anarchy of production, the chaos of the market, the drive of individual human beings to advance their own self-interest at the expense of the community. Screw my neighbor. Nobody else matters, right? Everyone for themselves, the greed of the rich and the drive to maximize profits. One open international system with big banks and corporations sucking wealth out of every corner of the world to enrich themselves as they set up a high-tech, low-wage police state, an open international system toying with the notion of World War III in order to preserve their power. This is the world we live in. We live in a world run by Satan, where Satan and chaos abounds to the point that we can't even imagine. Chaos has consumed the world. Liberalism, radical individualism, naked self-interest, nihilism, a lack of belief in truth, philosophical irrationalism, greed, destructiveness, pessimism. Satan reigns. Satan reigns. He rules from Wall Street. He rules from London. He rules from every international financial system, from Silicon Valley. Satan abounds, and chaos and pessimism and instability is everywhere. And what does that mean? That means order is coming. Order is coming. Because out of chaos cometh order. And that the natural way that these things work is there's a push and pull. And as the forces of order battle the forces of chaos, as the chaos gets more and more extreme and more crazy, that means that the order that comes out of this chaos is going to be a powerful order like we cannot imagine. It's going to be an order that is going to be so strong and powerful. This is Frederick Engels, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, one of the most important books ever written. And he's explaining the difference between socialism and capitalism. He writes, "But once their nature is understood, they can, in the hands of the producers working together, be transformed from master demons into willing servants. The difference is that between the destructive force of electricity and lightning in the storm and electricity under the command of a telegraph and the voltaic arc. The difference between a conflagration and a fire working in the service of man. With this recognition at last of the real nature of the productive forces of today, the social anarchy of production gives place to a social regulation of production upon a definite plan, according to the needs of the community and of each individual. Then the capitalist mode of appropriation, in which the product enslaves first the producer and then the appropriator, is replaced by the mode of appropriation of products that is based upon the nature of modern means of production. Upon the one hand, direct social appropriation as means of maintenance and extension of production. On the other, direct individual appropriation as a means of subsistence and enjoyment. Socialism is a struggle to take the electricity that is all around us and turn it into a telegraph and turn it into an outlet that you can plug in. Socialism is the struggle to take the wildfires raging every summer in California and transform them into a furnace to heat your home. It is about taking the huge growth of productive forces created by capitalism and centralizing it and rationally controlling it in order to have humanity gain from all of that energy. The struggle to create socialism is the struggle to bring logos. Let me repeat that. The struggle to create socialism is the struggle to bring order to the universe. It is a struggle to reassert rational planning and human reason and intelligence over the modern productive forces. It is the struggle of order to defeat chaos. It is the struggle of rationalism to defeat irrationalism. It is the struggle to see patterns. It is the struggle to overcome neurosis. It is the struggle to interact with our world and our universe in a rational way and to maximize human potential. And you can read that in Frederick Engels. And that is what we are doing. And that more or less is my message to you all tonight. I hope you got something out of it. Hope you found it productive. Hope you found it helpful. There's a couple things I want to say before I end my opening remarks. A couple things I need to get out of my system. Need to be said to complement what was already said before I start answering people's super chats. And we only have 2 super chats that have come in so far. So if people want to send more, by all means, give me something to talk about in the second half of the show. 2 super chats is going to make for a short show. And the night is young. It's just a little past 10. It's 10:16 Eastern Standard Time. I can be on here for 2 or 3 more hours if you want. So get me talking. Send me some questions by all means. But my point tonight is that socialism is a struggle to harness disorder and transform it into ordered power. It is a struggle to grab a wild horse and harness its energy and transform it into a very productive, fast racing horse. That is what we are struggling to do. And the main way that we have put that forward is that we have talked about our 4-point plan, our 4-point economic plan. We call for public control of our natural resources, the oil, the coal, the timber, the natural gas beneath America's surface, beneath America's soil. And the wealth, the natural wealth of this country should be the property of all of us. And instead of us having to pay taxes out of our paychecks, the whole country should get wealthier from our oil and from our coal and from our timber. And instead of a Wall Street banker having a right to the profits that come from the soil beneath our feet, the natural wealth of America should be the wealth of all of us. We call for public ownership of natural resources, oil, gas, coal, timber, all the wealth of America's land should be the common property of all of us. Public control of our natural resources. In addition to that, we call for a mass mobilization to rebuild the country. Hire the unemployed. All the people that are unemployed and all the people that are underemployed, stuck in short-term service sector, part-time jobs, should be hired and put to work building. We need to build some high-speed railway here in America. We need to repave our roads. We need to restructure our bridges so they don't fall down like crazy. We need to have affordable Wi-Fi in every part of the country, high-speed Wi-Fi. We need new universities. We need new schools. We need fusion energy. There's so much about this country's infrastructure that needs to be toned up, and we need to hire the unemployed and hire the young people and put them to work. And we should bring the troops home from around the world. We have hundreds of overseas military bases. Some people say even over 1,000. We should bring those troops home and put them to work rebuilding America. We need a mass mobilization to rebuild the country, something that would make Roosevelt's Works Progress Administration look like child's play. We need a mass national movement of reconstruction, a mass high-tech rebuilding makeover of America. Pave all the roads, new power plants, new schools, new universities, a mass mobilization to rebuild America. That's step number 2. Step number 3 would be the enactment and the creation of a national bank so that the lending of money was done in the interest of the entire country. And credit was assigned based on a national plan. The government controlling the purse strings on a federal, state, and local level, loaning money based on an overall economic plan to make the country wealthier. We decide we need more houses in this area, we loan people the money to buy them. If we need more businesses of this kind, if we need to strengthen our agricultural sector, we loan people money to start farming. If we control the purse strings and we use the lending of money, the centralization of credit, to redesign the economy of the country. A national bank and the centralization of credit, and furthermore, the canceling of debt, the debt industry, debt hanging over the next generation as a curse, student debt, mortgage debt, all of that, cancel the debt. We restructure the financial system to be centered around a gigantic national bank, the strategic lending of money. We get rid of the Federal Reserve, the rip-off scheme. We get rid of all the debt. We centralize credit and the printing of money, all in the hands of a national bank that operates according to a central plan to rebuild the country. And then the final step in our 4-point plan would be the enactment of an economic Bill of Rights. And as Roosevelt called for in his final years as president, before he died, Roosevelt called for an economic Bill of Rights, the right to a job, the right to housing, the right to education, the right to health care. We should make sure that everyone in this country is fully utilized. We should not see an economic Bill of Rights as a handout. And that's the way discourse is framed. I mean, that's the way the debate is taking place. I would argue the debate is wrong. The way that the argument is, Bernie Sanders says every young person should get free college and free health care because I am a nice guy and I want to help people. That's Bernie Sanders. And then the conservative says, why should they just get something for free? They had to work for it. I had to work. I didn't get free health care. I didn't get free college. Why should I? This is the wrong terms of discourse. The argument should be that in order to have a strong country, we need our people to be well educated. And so, as an investment in the future of the country, we provide education to train engineers, to train scientists, to train doctors, to train teachers as an investment in our country. The argument should be that in order to have a strong country, we need healthy people. We need people to eat healthy. We need people to live healthy lifestyles. We need people to be able to see doctors when they're sick. So healthcare is provided with an emphasis on preventative care, not an emphasis on treatment and getting people taking pills for the rest of their lives, but an emphasis on preventative care is provided to everyone as an investment in the nation. Because if they're going to be productive and generate wealth and make a stronger country, they need to be healthy. They can't be sick all the time. There should be a jobs guarantee. Why? Because Caleb's nice and I don't want anyone to be unemployed? No, because the labor power of every human being should be utilized to build a strong country. What a waste it is to have people unemployed. What a waste it is to have people employed in socially unnecessary ventures, figuring out derivative rip-off schemes on Wall Street, designing the junk mail I get in my mailbox every day. No, we should utilize the labor power of every person in the country in order to build a more prosperous and productive society. An economic Bill of Rights is an investment. It is about saying we want a nation of strong, healthy people, a nation of well-educated, smart people, and a nation of people using their bodies and using their brains to go out and generate wealth and productivity and make a stronger nation and country for all of us. That is ultimately what an economic Bill of Rights should be. Not a handout, not Bernie Sanders being a nice guy, and not conservatives saying, I worked for it. No one should get it free if I didn't get it. No, it should be an investment in the nation that comes with obligation to the nation. People should feel they have a duty to their community. People should feel they have a duty to their country, a duty to their neighbors, a duty to the people who live down the street. We should not be a nation that allows so many to suffer while so many others are indifferent. The indifference must end. The coldness, the lack of concern for others must end. We must become a nation that is connected in every possible way. Now, the slogan, right? Obviously, that 4-point plan I just listed is rather complex. The slogan that we invented for the Center for Political Innovation, I've been a socialist, communist my entire adult life, but I'm getting to the point that I don't think that's the best way to communicate with people. And that's a whole nother conversation. Maybe someone can bring that up during the Q&A. But the way that I have been communicating this 4-point plan is telling people we need a government of action. to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. A government of action, not a government that sits back and lets the country fall apart, but a government of action, a government that builds, a government that mobilizes. If you're a parent and your child is not being fed, doesn't have proper food, you can get arrested. If you're a parent and your child is in the wintertime, is going to school without gloves and a hat, you can be arrested. And when they arrest you, they're not arresting you for something you did. They're arresting you for something you did not do. You, as a parent, have an obligation to feed your child. You, as a parent, have an obligation to put warm clothes on your child in the wintertime. And if you do not carry out your obligation, you are guilty of criminal neglect. You are in dereliction of duty. You, as a parent, have an obligation to your child. I argue that the government of the United States at this time is guilty of criminal neglect. The American people are hungry. The American people are watching their country fall to shreds. The American people don't have education. The American people have roads and bridges that are falling apart and power plants that are collapsing. America is falling apart while our leaders are partying with their buddies in Ukraine and writing checks to Benjamin Netanyahu to murder Palestinians. They are guilty of criminal neglect on a massive scale. They should be dragged out of the Congress and dragged out of the White House in handcuffs, arrested for criminal neglect, because the Constitution of the United States says that their duty is to provide for the general welfare. And when I walk out on the streets of this country, I do not see general welfare. That is not what I see on the streets of America. I'm not looking at general welfare, and I'm looking instead at a criminal class of monopolists and bankers and hired stooges who are conspiring to prevent us from getting the general welfare and sending what should be providing for our general welfare to Ukraine and to Israel and to the island of Taiwan and to every corner of the planet except for America, except for into the stomachs and the communities and the neighborhoods of American working people. We need a government not of neglect. We need a government of action. A government of action that will fight for working families. A government that will pave those roads. A government that will seize those natural resources. A government that will create a national bank. A government that will mobilize to educate, to provide health care, and to utilize the labor power of the entire nation. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. That's what we need. A government of action to fight for working families. It's that simple. A government of action to fight for working families. Now, the other slogan that has long been a fixture of the Center for Political Innovation and what we're doing here, the slogan that we have long used is out of the movement to the masses. We have no desire to recruit the local communist club. We have no desire to recruit the members of some small minority of people who go to rallies and protests. We have no desire to do that. I want to recruit the people in your neighborhood. I want to recruit your coworkers. I want to recruit your classmates. I want to recruit your family members. I want to recruit the people in your neighborhood. I am interested in recruiting the bulk of the American people. I am not interested in trying to appeal to the small minority who are attracted to what they think socialism and communism are. And that we need to do everything that we do with the understanding that that is who we are trying to recruit. We are not trying to be the top socialists, the top communists. We're not trying to be king of the left for them. We are trying to build a movement that can flourish and grow among the American people. And so the slogan "out of the movement to the masses" has been a slogan that we have utilized at the Center for Political Innovation as we communicate to people that it is the bulk of the American people that we wish to reach, and it is not the leftist milieu. Now, unfortunately, we have been hesitant to fully implement that slogan. It's been hard to do. I've spent my adult life in communist groups. I've been using communist rhetoric and explaining communism as my primary way of reaching people. But one thing has led to another, and one development has led to another, and more we are facing the fact that we have no choice but to really do it. We have to really go out of the movement to the masses. We have to go and reach people who would never go looking for this kind of messaging. We have to stop trying to appeal to people who would go looking for this messaging. And we have to recognize that I just spent the opening of this broadcast explaining that there is a battle in the universe between order and chaos, and that we are on the side of order. And order is synonymous with God in the tradition of Christianity. Order is logos. We are on the side of logos. And we seek to create logos, to bring order. And in fact, Frederick Engels explained that what we are trying to do with economics is to bring order out of chaos. Right? We're trying to transform the lightning into a telegraph. We're trying to transform the wildfire conflagration into a furnace to heat our food. We are trying to bring order out of chaos. And we understand that this is what the Soviet Union did. This is why Stalin was able to defeat Hitler and make the Soviet Union a rich and powerful country, industrialize, wipe out illiteracy. This is why China has been able to lift up its head. This is the achievements of socialism, and the movement of communism and socialism historically has been a struggle to bring order out of chaos. However, the aesthetic of communism, the red flag, the revolt, the slogans, the aesthetic of communism, and the appeal of communism in the Western world is an appeal of chaos. Young people, myself included, guilty as charged, become interested in communism because they have a desire for chaos. Young people become interested in communism because they see it as the enemy. They see it as the devil. They see it as something that is opposed to the current order that we live under. Communism has a satanic appeal. In America, communism is portrayed as the great evil. And so people become attracted to it because they feel so alienated from the society they live in that they seek to align themselves with evil, or what people are being told is evil. That is not our appeal. We desire to connect people with each other. We desire to have people feel a sense of loyalty to their country. We want to build a mass movement to build a better country. And in the minds of the American people, that has nothing to do with communism, because communism is associated with chaos. In the American mind, communism is associated with the enemy, with the other, with the devil. And that is not the nature of communist economics. It's not the nature of socialism. Might have been the nature of the Marxist movement coming out of the French Revolution. It might have been even the nature of what Marx was aspiring to do. Doesn't matter. The communist world and the anti-imperialist countries are not striving to create chaos. And we, as opponents of imperialism and opponents of this global financial system, we are not striving to create chaos either. We are striving to create order. And so if we continue to associate ourselves with an aesthetic that most Americans think represents chaos and think represents disorder and thinks represents instability and thinks represents the enemy, we're not doing the right thing. Striving to own communism is stupid. It's very, very stupid. Wanting to be able to say, I'm the boss of American communism. Yes, sir, I own communism in America. You know? I mean, that would be like, that would be, you're owning something. You're investing in a corporation. You're buying a stock that is never going to blow up. It is a stupid thing to do, and it is a scarcity mindset. And the people that are trying to own communism right now, let me just be real about this. The people trying to own communism right now, they are very much of the mindset that communism in America will only ever be this big. Only ever be this big. And so, if it's only ever going to be this big, the only way that we can get a bigger slice of it is if we cut into somebody else's. Because if the pie is only this big, the only way that your slice can get bigger is by cutting into somebody else's. Well, that is not our mindset. Because we realize that if we are at all serious about what we are doing, if this is not a complete waste of time, which I do not believe it is, I think what we are doing right now makes a lot of sense. We have to think of it as the pie being unlimited. The pie has to be bigger, bigger, and bigger. The pie has to include millions and millions and millions of Americans who are going to need a movement like this to join as their country gets more and more chaotic. And so trying to battle for control of a small, small niche of people who consider themselves to be communists is a complete waste of time. The majority of people who call themselves communists have very little in common with me. There's only a small minority of people who consider themselves communists who share my worldview on world events, on what socialism even means, etc. And why is it in my interest? And why is it productive for me to battle with other people, to be the boss of people, of this small minority of people who agree with me? How in the world is that a productive use of my time? That is a confession that I don't believe I can win. That's what that is. If I am threatened and concerned about other little tiny communist sects, and I'm worried that some little tiny, they might join this other tiny little communist group and not join my little tiny communist group. Oh no, what am I going to do? If I get into that mindset, I'm an incel. That is an incel mindset. That's how incels think, right? The incel, I can never get a girlfriend. I'm an involuntary celibate. I'm going to develop a whole mentality, a whole identity around the idea that I can never get a girlfriend. This is where most of these people are operating. They have a scarcity mindset. They have an incel mindset. And they're thinking like losers. We have to think like winners. We have to think like winners. We have to assume that we are building a movement that can appeal to millions of people. We're not trying to monetize a niche. We are trying to build the anti-imperialist movement that this country needs. We are trying to build a solid piece of the block of anti-imperialists. Folks, I don't know if you've heard. Trump was not so great when he was president. Did some good things, like met with Kim Jong-un. That was good. But, overall, bombed Syria, murdered Qasem Soleimani, anti-China. But I got to tell you, Donald Trump, ever since he almost died, ever since they almost shot him and they got his ear, he's been doing some good shit. Donald Trump has embraced RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. He's basically saying, he's saying no to Ukraine. And now the latest is Donald Trump is talking against sanctions. Did you see this? Donald Trump, the latest thing he said, we have got to stop using sanctions on countries. It's hurting the dollar. We got to stop doing that. Sanctions, it's just not a good way of doing things. I am going to cancel sanctions on Russia because it's hurting the dollar. And I hate it. Did you hear that? He's not saying it because he's an anti-imperialist. He's saying it because he speaks for the lower levels of capital. There's a division in the ruling class right now. The bulk of the ruling class of America, the bulk of the capitalists, just want to make money. Donald Trump wants to make money. And the imperialists, the ultra-monopolies, the Atlanticists are determined to wage an all-out fight to contain and stabilize capitalism with a low-wage police state at home and to push back and destroy Russia and China and Venezuela and Iran and all the countries that have broken free from it. And Donald Trump is sitting there and he's saying, I use dollars. That's what I spend. When I go to the store, I use dollars. That's what I do. I buy with dollars, and I don't want the dollar to lose its value. So we got to stop putting these sanctions on Russia, sanctions on Iran, sanctions on Venezuela. It's just not helping us. I want my dollar to be valuable. The more people that are using a dollar, the wealthier I am. So we're going to stop doing sanctions when I'm in office, okay? We are going to stop doing sanctions. I want people using the dollar because the more people that use the dollar, the more valuable the dollar is. I don't like Bidenomics. I don't like it. This is awesome. He's not doing it because he's a good guy. He's doing it because he wants his dollars to be more valuable. And that's the point. I wrote a book explaining all of this. Where is America going? Marxism, MAGA, and the coming revolution. And I explained what all of this is about. There is a degrowth fascist faction that is trying to set up a low-wage police state, drive down living standards, and marches toward World War III. And the bulk of the capitalist class doesn't want it. And now we must build what the communists back in the day said they were trying to build. We must build an anti-monopoly coalition, an anti-monopoly coalition that is pro-growth, that is all about building and constructing and realizing the American dream. That is what we must build. We must build a pro-growth, anti-monopoly corporation or coalition, an anti-monopoly coalition centered around the 4-point economic plan, a government of action to make sure that we grow and to defeat the power of the ultra monopolies and the imperialists. We need a government of action to fight for working families. And that's the only way that Donald Trump's dollars can keep being worth more. That's the only way that small business owners can have people have enough money to go and buy their products at their stores. That's the only way that people who are invested in this country can see prosperity. That's the only way that neighborhoods in Alabama and Georgia and Texas and Minnesota can be economically revitalized. That's the whole point. We need a pro-growth, anti-monopoly coalition to defeat imperialism. And at the end of the day, as much as many of the lower level capitalists think they're libertarians and free market and all of that, they're going to realize, they're going to learn the hard way that they need a government that punches up. They need a government that punches up, a government to kick Jeff Bezos' ass, a government to kick ExxonMobil and BP and Shell's ass, a government to fight for working families. And it's going to be hard for them to realize it, but we're going to help them realize it by building the anti-monopoly, anti-imperialist coalition that this country desperately needs. We are going to do it. We take our job seriously. And so we're going to do it. That's what we're going to do. Folks, I'm going to end my opening remarks, and I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you something that may seem contradictory. You get out of this world what you ask for. You get out of this world what you expect. All right? I'm just telling you, if you expect bad out of this world, you're going to get bad. If you expect people to treat you poorly, you will get treated poorly. If you expect poverty and you focus on poverty and you think about poverty all day, you're going to get poverty. We get out of this world what we expect. And that's why I'm not a materialist. I realize that, what we bring to the table with us has a lot to do with what we take home. And that's a hard thing to realize. And it's a hard thing to challenge yourself, to force yourself to expect the best, to force yourself to be confident, to force yourself to believe that you will get the best outcome, to force yourself to aim high and envision great victories and achievements for yourself. It is a challenge. But if you want good out of this world, you got to get it. However, and this is where it gets tricky, in addition to you getting what you expect and you learning to expect the best from the world, and you with your mind and with your intentions and with your will shaping the world, you have an original mind. You have a destiny and a journey that you are meant to live. You were put on this earth for a purpose. And while you strive to do the best you can and to attach yourself and to envision the best and to expect the best and to celebrate victory, while you do that, you will best achieve it when you realize what that plan and what that vision and what that intention for you is. And when your desires and your expectations and your vision is attached to your original purpose and your original vision and the purpose for which you were created, the job you were meant to do, when your intentions and your vision and your willpower and your insights is connected with what you were supposed to do from the beginning and the purpose that you were meant to live, you can be unstoppable. You can drive history forward like no one else. You can develop the ability to move mountains. You can be powerful on a level that you can only imagine. When your willpower and your intention and your motivation and your beliefs is attached to the purpose for which you are here, you can be unstoppable. But it's a struggle to expect the best from the world. It's a struggle to aim high. It's a struggle to achieve. It's a struggle to be a builder. It's a struggle to always be expecting success and to attach yourself to the best. That's a struggle. And furthermore, it is a struggle to know who you really are, to know what your purpose really is, to know what it is that you've been guided to do. But when those two things match, boom, victory, unstoppable victory.